Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and today I'm talking about what is turning out to be the very divisive 28 years later. This is a sequel almost 28 years in the making. It's actually, well, 23 or 18, depending on if you count from which installment. I can still remember being in like middle school, watching the original 28 Days Later on HBO, and was completely blown away by it when it came out. I know, yes, they're infected. It's not a zombie movie, but they were the first movie to use fast zombies, something that I know is kind of a point of contention in the horror community, but it cannot be overstated how much of a game changer and trendsetter the original 28 Days Later really was, kicking off really an entire wave of zombie post-apocalyptic media that dominated the 2000s horror. So when I heard they were doing 28 years, like with everything else, expectations were really high. And like everyone else, I have very, very mixed feelings about the final product. There's a lot it does really, really well, but then there's other things that baffle me to no end where I think, why did you do that? So, spoiler warning, I will be getting into spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie or you don't want it spoiled, go watch 20 years later, then come back here. You better come back. Let's get into 28 years later.
That's all the stars in the world. 7, 6, 11, 5, 4, 17, 32.
First, let's talk about what works with this movie, and there is a lot to talk about. First things first, I absolutely love its opening. It is insane, it is brutal, it is visceral. It begins with Teletubbies, but that opening sequence ends with some really messed up stuff that you can't believe they're doing. Oh, you're going there? You're going full Anakin with the younglings? Okay. I also really love the cast. Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, Ray Fiennes. We don't see him until later in the movie, but he very much owns that final act that he's in. And I gotta talk about this kid. Alfie Williams is very young, and I say this without any sense of hyperbole. He gives what might be the best child actor performance I've seen in a very long time. The amount of range this kid shows in a movie that's essentially a coming of age story in the post apocalypse. Aaron Taylor Johnson may feel like he's the protagonist, at least in the beginning. He's not. His son Spike is. He's forced to grow up in this harsh world in a way that makes us kind of look at our own world through the lens of, you always hear people say, oh, why would you want to bring kids into a world this chaotic, this messed up? This is a movie that takes that idea and just runs with it, dials it up to 11. And I kind of love everything about it. Like I said with the opening, it's shot in such a visceral manner. No, not just because the infected have prosthetic genitals that flop around when they chase you. That's the whole thing. Danny Boyle directs the hell out of it, sometimes going a little too far, which I'll get into. But I just love this movie's overall style and tone. I love that the Rudyard Kipling, Boots poem that played in the trailer makes it into the movie. I love that this little village in the Scottish Highlands is kind of forced to go through Scottish history again and how they rebuild and how they create like the feudal system again. It's a really fascinating study on how society would rebuild while still being an incredibly effective, tense, and at times terrifying zombie movie. I know they're infected, but come on, it's the zombie subgenre. It's also kind of amazing that the whole thing was shot on iPhones, giving it this sort of gritty look. I mean, it's basically what I'm shooting on right now. So, to all you would be filmmakers out there, if Danny Boyle can make 28 years later shooting on iPhones, what's stopping you? There's also this really beautiful, tragic poignancy to it with the whole bone temple and Jodie Comer's character coming to terms with her terminal illness and accepting the inevitability of death, and the whole idea that while we're not that We are not that different from the infected. They are still human. Death is the one thing that unites us, and that even in a brutal post apocalypse where people are being ripped to shreds, there can still be such thing as dignity with death. It's a tearjerker, and you don't expect that going in. Granted, it makes you hate Aaron Taylor Johnson's character all that much more, not just because he's cheating on his wife, but the way he gaslights his son. And in a weird way, it creates this dichotomy of like which path is Spike gonna go? Is he gonna more so emulate the very harsh, you know, bleak existence that is his father, or the more warm and empathetic existence that is his mother? And he has to make that choice. And I love that it ends with him deciding he's going to stay on the mainland, and he's going to continue that journey of growth that began with, we go from the very beginning of the movie. He's scared to kill the infected. Yes, they're infected, they're monsters, they're coming after him, but deep down he still feels there is some sense of humanity in them, to him going on this journey on his own. All that being said, this movie makes some very, very baffling, bizarre choices that bother and frustrate me, because if it weren't for these things, I think I would like it all that much more. But I certainly don't want to penalize a movie for taking risks. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland could have played this movie perfectly safe. 28 Weeks Later is an example of a safe sequel. Yes, it's well made. Yes, it is narratively, it is very straightforward. It has some amazing sequences in it. I still think the opening scene of 28 Weeks Later is the best of the whole trilogy. Well, so far, we still have two more movies to go, which I'll get to. But when I look at 28 Weeks Later as a whole, there's nothing really that profound about it. Where there is, I think, with Days and Years, but I think that that surrealism, that experimental, bizarre filmmaking choices, it makes the movie stand out more, but I can't agree with every single choice that it makes. First and foremost, it kind of annoys me that, yes, I understand that Alex Garland and Danny Boyle wanted the virus to be limited to England, Scotland, Wales, just that one island. We don't know. They don't really mention Ireland. They don't mention Jersey or the Isle of Wight or anything like that. So I'm not sure if it's affecting them as well. But I feel like it very lazily in its opening text is like, well, mainland Europe beat back the infection. We saw them running through Paris at the end of 28 Weeks Later. And I know that that's something that Garland and Boyle didn't like, and that they wish they could have just retconned 28 Weeks Later. Here's the thing, though. Couldn't you have? Couldn't you have just said, "This is just a direct sequel to 28 Days Later"? But they even include footage from 28 Weeks Later as they're, like, choppily editing through montages of violence in British history. We see little snippets of what I believe is 28 Weeks Later, when the American snipers just start targeting everyone at ground level. So, that has to now be canon because you've included that, but we just beat it back. Well, then how did England so easily get taken over if 28 days later, after those kids landed in France, they were running through Paris? That's a weird nitpick that I wish they had either just not included that in the continuity or found a better way to make the continuity match. That's just me being weird, nitpicky Dave that sometimes I have a problem with. Just ask my wife and friends.
It's true.
It also has to be asked, how are any infected still alive at this point? It's been 28 years. Again, we know from canon they're supposed to starve to death after 5 to 6 weeks. Yes, we do see some of the larger infected eating worms, and maybe that is helping sustain them. Maybe they are eating little bits, but they should then be still dying and not healthy. Because remember, these are not undead zombies, these are living humans infected with a virus. That I feel like, especially if the population has gone down so significantly over 28 years, how are there enough fresh people to create new infected as they bite and attack more people? Otherwise, shouldn't all of them have died? And maybe the later sequels will get into this, but there's an entire can of worms they open when you realize the rest of the world is the modern world we have. We learned that from our Swedish friend Eric, who shows up briefly with his smartphone and his Instagram filter girlfriend with the lip fillers that Spike makes fun of. We learn that the rest of the world has largely carried on as usual, just leaving this island in its quarantine. And that raises so many questions. It's been 28 years. Have they not done any major efforts to try to evacuate the survivors? Have they just said, screw it, England, you're on your own? What are other countries thinking? Are there YouTube conspiracy theorists talking about what's really going on this island? Oh, you really believe there's a rage virus? I heard it was lizard people. I heard it was the deep state. I heard it was insert whatever random conspiracy theory that exists in our world, but would be dialed up to 11 because you have an actual zombie like infection post apocalypse happening in such a populated country like England. These are all questions that I don't know the movies are going to answer, but they were just, I couldn't get them out of my head. The thing that really frustrates me about it, it's a matter of tone. Yes, I know. Let me be like the 50th person on the internet, actually, probably 500th at this point, to point out that final scene where, surprise, the little kid from the beginning wasn't Aaron Taylor Johnson. It was this guy, Jimmy, who shows up with his merry band of parkour tracksuit Power Rangers to fight the infected in a scene that kind of ruins a really beautiful, poignant moment as Spike is narrating his letter to his father about how he has to go on his own and he has to become his own man. And they just randomly show up in a way that completely subverts the tone and not in a good way because up to that point the movie had taken itself seriously and the movie yes had its surreal moments but it never felt wacky or goofy until that scene came on, and it really, really bothers me, not just because of the tonal shift that comes out of left field, but because this movie's doing Mummy 2017. It's doing the thing where it knows it's gonna be a trilogy, and it is intentionally robbing itself of its own sense of closure and its own sense of being a standalone to set up another sequel. Yes, I know we're probably going to see Rafe Fiennes again in the sequel. I know that the infected baby, who's not actually infected, is probably going to play a role in the sequel. I know that Spike and his father are going to reunite, and all that's going to play, a more significant role later. But that doesn't mean you have to use this movie at the expense, again, of its own three-act structure to set that up, and that doesn't mean you need to ruin what was a really powerful ending with such a weird, campy, cheesy moment that feels like it's from a totally not just different movie, but a totally different genre. This movie was the serious, bleak post-apocalypse, and it randomly turns into Anna and the Apocalypse. Now, here's the thing, I love Anna and the Apocalypse, but I would not say that that's the same movie as 28 Days or Weeks or Years Later, because while they're both zombies, vastly different approaches, vastly different tones. And if you were to splice the two of them together, I don't think it would work. And as much as I love Danny Boyle's directing, and this is like the most minor of nitpicks, I think it gets a little like when we see quick cuts of like the infected in night vision, or when we see like the stylistic quick cuts, when each one's hit by the arrow. It's really cool the first few times. It's all right the second few times. By like the 20th time they're doing it, you're like, okay, I get it, Danny Boyle. That's a directing choice. It's well directed, and I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing. He absolutely does. I actually want him to hold back a little bit because it gets to the point, especially towards the third act, where it's look at my directing. Look at audience. Are you noticing what I'm doing? Are you noticing this stylish choice? Are you noticing this? And again, if this wasn't such a good movie and everything else, I wouldn't have these like nitpicks to focus on. I thoroughly enjoyed 20 Years Later. It is an excellent film, or should I say, it is a great film. I don't know that I would call it the perfect legacy sequel that it should be because these creative choices, I think, hold it back a little bit. But much like Star Wars The Last Jedi, hear me out, hear me out. I don't agree with every creative choice it makes, but I respect that it goes for those bold choices, even if they don't all pay off. I respect that it doesn't play itself safe. But hey, these are just my thoughts. These are just my ramblings. This is just my rant. This is just my channel. Let me know in the comments, what did you think of 28 Years Later? Did you love it? Did those baffling choices ruin the movie for you? Did it enhance the movie for you? Am I just being too harsh and nitpicky? Please let me know in the comments. People say I often am. And, if you guys do, then my wife can be like, see, everyone else says it too. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up trapped in a post apocalyptic England and Scotland while the rest of the world can still have Instagram. And as always, every day is Halloween.